Be part of the peace movement. Share this episode using hashtag The Great Disarmament and download the free peace resource guide at aviskalfsbeek.com/peace guide. The Great Disfarmament, The Great Disarmament, Part 5, Cold Crops. Hi, I'm Avis Kalfsbeek, author, podcast host, and peace storyteller. This is The Great Disfarmament, The Great Disarmament, a special podcast series from Pieces Here, tracing the parallel histories of how we learn to kill and how we might stop. If you're just joining us, welcome. Each episode maps a moment in the twin stories of war and agriculture. The war was over, but the weapons kept evolving. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, global conflict didn't disappear. It shifted forms. Nations stopped bombing each other, mostly, and started competing in new ways. Space races, nuclear stockpiles, and proxy wars waged in countries many Americans couldn't find on a map. Meanwhile, in the fields, another kind of race was underway. Governments, scientists, and corporations launched what they called the capital G Green Revolution, a term that promised life, growth, and hope. But behind the language was something else. The Green Revolution meant replacing traditional seeds with hybrids, replacing compost with synthetic fertilizers, replacing biodiversity with monoculture. Scale became the standard. If it couldn't feed 1,000, it wasn't worth planting. And beneath it all, a new kind of chemical dependency took root. The Cold War introduced a different kind of militarism, one rooted not in direct combat, but in threat, surveillance, and control. The United States and the Soviet Union amassed nuclear arsenals capable of destroying the world many times over. War became less about soldiers and more about deterrence, less about boots on the ground and more about hands on buttons, missile defense systems, reconnaissance satellites, early computing. It was a doctrine called mutually assured destruction, and somehow it worked. Well, if by worked we mean that 2 nuclear bombs were dropped on civilians, killing over 200,000 people and injuring tens of thousands more. For the next 30 years after Vietnam, the war remained theoretical, suspended in a constant state of readiness. And in that suspended tension, profit and power flourished. Now shift your gaze from missile silos to farmland. The Green Revolution began in Mexico in the 1940s, selected by American agronomists for its political stability and year-round growing conditions. The project was then exported to India, the Philippines, and beyond. The stated goal was simple: end hunger. But the method was industrial. High-yield seeds that couldn't reproduce, fertilizers made from fossil fuels, pesticides developed in wartime chemical labs, tractors and irrigation systems bundled with credit packages and corporate contracts. In parts of India, wheat yields doubled, but so did dependency. Chemical runoff poisoned water. Farmers sank into debt. Indigenous seed varieties vanished. The logic was eerily familiar. Outarm nature. Control the future. Stay ahead. Farming, like warfare, became a matter of control. And just like the Cold War, it offered the illusion of safety while hiding the cost. Rachel Carson was not a general or a politician. She was a marine biologist, a quiet observer, a poet of the natural world. In 1962, during the height of the Cold War tension and just weeks before the Cuban Missile Crisis, Carson published Silent Spring. While global leaders debated nuclear missiles, she turned attention to another kind of devastation, one carried not by bombs but by spray. Carson revealed how synthetic pesticides, especially DDT, were poisoning ecosystems and disrupting life at every level. Silent Spring was directly inspired by a letter she received from her friend Olga Huckins in Duxbury, Massachusetts. In the letter, Huckins described the death of songbirds following the state's aerial spraying of DDT on her property. That letter sparked Carson's investigation into the dangers of pesticides and the ecological repercussions of their indiscriminate use. Her writing drew a clear line between chemical warfare and chemical agriculture, showing that the same logic, control, domination, convenience, was destroying the natural world. She named the danger not only as toxic chemicals, but as the mindset that produced them. "We stand now where two roads diverge," Carson warned. But unlike the roads in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. At its end lies disaster, she wrote. Her work stirred public outcry. It led to bans on DDT, inspired the modern environmental movement, and offered a rare act of restraint in a culture of escalation. She didn't shout, she wrote, and her words shifted the course of history. By the late 20th century, farming had been transformed from a relationship into a system, one engineered, standardized, and scaled. Inputs and outputs, contracts and chemicals, genes patented, seeds commodified, land converted into production units. Disfarmament wasn't just happening, it was global policy. And like the Cold War itself, its devastation didn't require explosions. The damage was quiet, structural, and enduring. Missiles were stored in bunkers, seeds were locked behind patents and corporate vaults, and the hands that controlled them often never touched the earth. From page to the soil. The Cold War didn't just reshape geopolitics, it reshaped imagination. It taught a generation that domination was the path to safety, that scale was the measure of progress, that if we controlled the seed, the spray, and the soil, we could outrun hunger, nature, and consequence. Norman Borlaug, the agronomist often credited with launching the Green Revolution, believed deeply in this promise. In The Man Who Fed the World, author Leon Hesser describes Borlaug's commitment to ending famine through science, scale, and speed. "You can't build peace on empty stomachs," Borlaug famously said. "Civilization as it's known today could not have evolved, nor can it survive without an adequate food supply." To his defenders, Borlaug was a humanitarian, a man who saved millions by boosting yields and modernizing agriculture. But critics point to the cost. High-yield seeds required chemical inputs. Those inputs degraded the soil. Water sources were contaminated. Traditional farming knowledge was lost, and farmers became dependent on banks, on foreign seed, on oil. Even Borlaug himself later in life acknowledged the danger of ignoring sustainability. "If we continue to increase yields without care for the soil," he warned, "we will solve one problem only to create another." Rachel Carson offered a counterpoint. She warned not just of chemicals, but of forgetting that the soil is alive, that restraint is not weakness, that we are part of the systems we try to manage. Silent Spring asked a Cold War generation to reconsider the story it was telling about nature, power, and peace. She didn't reject science, but she rejected domination. The soil still remembers her question, and perhaps so do we. Next episode, we close out the Great Disfarmament with one final chapter, Regeneration and Resistance, a story of seed savers, soil stewards, and the quiet rise of repair, followed by a recap of parts 1 through 6. Then we step into the Great Disarmament, beginning with spears and surrender, and the question of how peace begins, even when no one's ready. See you there. That wraps up this episode of Peace is Here. Will you please take a moment to subscribe and share it with a friend? Subscribing helps others discover peaceful, independent storytelling, and it means a lot to me. I'm Avis Kalfsbeek, author of the Pedro the Water Dog Saves the Planet series, eco-adventure novellas for readers who care about environmental justice, joy, and saving the world one story at a time. You can learn more at aviskalfsbeek.com. Book 6, Monomutante, is now available at all major online retailers, or if you'd like to support my book directly, you can get the ebook at aviskalfsbeek.com/mono-mutante. It's a wild satirical ride through food, farming, and the messiness of recovery. When you subscribe to my list, you'll also be the first to hear about my next book, Bulletproof, which asks, what in the world are we going to do about guns? A link to subscribe is in the show notes. From October 18th to November 8th, 2025, I'm running a live Kickstarter campaign. I'd be so grateful if you'd visit aviskalfsbeek.com/Kickstarter to get notified. I'm creating a companion field journal for Book 1, One More Year, called Peace Stuff Primer, along with a stage play version of the book. I can't wait to share it with you. This episode was human narrated by me with the help of AI, which has promised to let me know if it ever makes something up. So far, no confessions, but if you think I've missed something or if you just want to say hello, I'd love to hear from you. Podcast music is by Javier Peque Rodriguez. You'll find links to his music on Spotify and Bandcamp in the show notes. I'm Avis Kalfsbeek. Thank you again. Until next time, listen for the peace.